lovely, lovely friends. Welcome to today's video. In this video, we will be talking about the WVU, or the West Virginia University co-ed murders that took place in the 1970s. This continues to be an unsolved case to this day, and this one just seemed pretty fascinating to me. It involves mysterious letters being sent to the police over a course of time that will give clues and information to lead the police to more and more information about the case. So we will dive into that here in just a moment. Let's get our quick housekeeping out of the way. First, please check out the pinned comment down below where you will find 3 cases that I am interested in covering. Please take a look and comment with your vote so I know which one has the most interest. Second, if you are not already subscribed, please consider doing so. I would greatly appreciate that level of support from you. I also have a non-true crime related channel called Opal Soul. So if you're into ASMR, whisper rambles, and just something really low-key, definitely check it out. And then finally, hidden gems. You will hear me give a hidden gem in this video, and when you hear it, make sure you comment it right away. I will do my best to make sure I put them in more the beginning to middle of the video, because I know people fall asleep to these videos. But the purpose of that hidden gem is essentially to benefit you by getting you more content. So the more comments we get, the more content you will get from me. So that concludes our housekeeping, and let's talk about the West Virginia University co-ed murders. So the 1970s were supposed to be a new decade, or the start of a new decade, where people are looking forward to, the good things coming. It's time to turn over a new leaf, make changes, have good things come your way. But unfortunately, in early January of 1970, there were a lot of bad events from the 60s that were kind of still fresh on everyone's mind in the United States, and definitely in the region that we will be talking about today. Some of these included the gruesome Manson family murders, the ongoing Vietnam War, and violent riots that were taking place during the United States. So during this time, from the transition of the 1960s to 1970, a girl by the name of Karen Farrell had this feeling that time was running out for her. She was only 20 years old, and so it's not the age where you expect something bad is going to happen to you. But this sinister thought was perpetually plaguing her mind. In 1970, Morgantown, West Virginia, was a small college town that had recently been racked by a series of concerning issues. The Loretta bombing, and an attack on a country prosecutor fighting illegal gambling ring made residents think twice about the safety of their community. West Virginia University loomed over the quaint streets, which led only to rural roads. In this area, you would not find any highways or interstates. You would not find any malls. It was a very small, quaint town, and this little town had one coffee shop, and it was actually a 24-hour coffee shop. A large percentage of the population was composed of college students attending West Virginia University. And two such students that will be the center of our case today were Merritt Malarick and Karen Farrell. Merritt had grown up in New Jersey and was one of 3 children, born to her mother, who was a teacher, and her father, who was a dentist. She had a very unique name, which was due to a stroke of genius by her parents, who had the names Margaret and Edward, so they basically married their 2 names and came up with Marid. They had decided that their first daughter's name should come from their 2 names combined, so obviously they took the Mar from Margaret and the Ed from Edward, so Marid. But Marid's name was not her only standout feature. She was known for being outgoing, having many friends, and possessing an air of sophistication that made her seem worldly, especially in the Appalachian Morgantown. Her dorm mates in Westchester Hall would later say that Marid, as the sociology major, was high-strung and potentially dabbling in the hippie lifestyle. Marid's roommate was a friend from high school by the name of Donna DeYoung, and she would call Marid focused and kind, and not one to be led astray by the party lifestyle. Karen Farrell was a close friend of Marid's and would agree with this. She had not been around as long as Donna, since Marid and Karen would meet on West Virginia University's campus, but the 2 girls would quickly become best friends. Where Marid was outspoken, Karen was reserved and quiet, so they actually balanced each other out nicely in that sense. Karen had grown up in West Virginia to adoptive parents and pursued psychology in Morgantown, and it was questionable if perhaps she did this to better understand herself. Karen was described as cynical and often paranoid, especially about one thing in particular. Karen was convinced that she was going to die before her 20th birthday. And in fact, she would confide to friends that she had this impending sense of doom, and that she was going to be assaulted and killed before her 20th birthday. So that's like a really heavy thing to be afraid afraid of, and I'm not quite sure why she believed this or if there was anything that transpired to back this up. I don't know, but this was what she was feeling. Despite that, though, even with this fear, Karen and Marit were very social girls. They would spend a lot of time hanging out with friends and going to parties. They never really did anything more than moderate drinking or smoking cannabis from time to time, which pretty common for college students. So it sounds like despite this fear that Karen had, she didn't use that to be a recluse. Like, she still enjoyed her life. When Marit wasn't studying or exploring Morgantown with Karen, she could be found with her boyfriend, John Mangiello, whom she affectionately called Munch. He was in a fraternity and was soon to earn his fraternity pin. Many of the couple's friends thought that Munch had his sights set on pinning Marit, which was a sign back in the 60s and 70s that a couple was serious. But Munch would find himself with some competition. Recently, Marit's boyfriend, back from when she was in high school, Larry Casazza, visited the WVU campus and took Marit out on a date. Nevertheless, their friends would say that Marit remained faithful to Munch, brushing off the date with her ex as nothing more than a final goodbye. You know, not gonna lie, that's a little weird to me. Like, to me, that would not fly now. Like, if you're actually in a relationship with somebody else, but I don't know, maybe Karen, or maybe Marit and Munch, like, weren't quite official yet. Like, maybe they were in the early stages. I don't know. On January 11th of 1970, the new school year was just beginning. Before classes really got into full swing, the girls would head to a theater to watch Oliver. There, they would meet up with two of Marit's friends by the name of Clarence Lewis and Paulette Burns. The pair would sit together after the intermission, and by the time the show finished, night had fallen and it was very cold outside with a chill settling over the city. So at this point, there was no transportation system that ferried students to and from the WVU campus in Morgantown. So they would have to walk home. So the group of students began to walk home. They were skipping and singing the Oliver soundtrack for a few blocks before the wind really started to pick up and snow began to fall. Karen and Marit would quickly decide that they were going to hitchhike back to their dorm rather than freeze in the Appalachian winter temperatures. And due to the university's lack of a transportation system, hitchhiking was apparently a common means of transportation around the area. And so the fact that Karen and Marit say, like, that's how they're gonna get back to their dorm was not, like, suspicious. Like, to me, when I read that, I was like, oh my god, no, like, you're asking for trouble. Like, I think nowadays hitchhiking is automatically associated with danger, but it wasn't necessarily like that back in this time period when these girls girls were in their early 20s or late teens. So when they come up with this plan to hitchhike back to the dorms, they don't think anything of it. This is just normal for them. Karen and Marid were last seen slipping into the front seat of a light-colored sedan. Their friend Clarence would note how strange it was that when he waved goodbye as the car passed, neither girl returned the sentiment. They simply stared straight ahead into the night. I don't know why the two friends that they had watched Oliver with decided not to hitchhike home. That I don't know. But what we know is that two went in the car and two did not. The dorms had a midnight curfew, and when that time came and went, with the girls not having returned, Marid's roommate became nervous. It was not like Marid to come in late. A group of girls would gather in the common room and voiced their concern to the dorm mother, who would call the Morgantown police around 1 in the morning to report Karen and Marid missing. Initially, authorities presumed that the two girls had perhaps run away. And how many times have we heard that assumption, right? Marid was said to have been particularly stressed as of late and had made mention of taking a few days for herself away from Morgantown. And as true as that could have been, the people in her life were okay, if she was gonna take time away, she would have told somebody. She wouldn't just go without telling anybody. Again, how many times have we heard that, right? So Marid and Karen's friends and families refused to believe that the girls had simply left of their own volition. Tips came in that the girls were spotted hitching a ride in a semi-truck. It took the police weeks to track down this reported semi-truck, only to find that the girls traveling in the cab were not, in fact, Marid and Karen. Those closest to the missing students pressured the police to persevere, and they were convinced that foul play was involved. And I gotta give it credit to their friends for pushing and not letting the police take it lightly and saying hey, we know how our friends are. This is not something that they would do. This is very out of their character. Fellow students began to circulate petitions in an attempt to coerce the police to mount an investigation. So again, major kudos to these group of students for advocating for their friends. Okay, so 2.5 months would go by, and the girls had not been found. Karen's dorm room had been cleaned out by her parents, which I can't even imagine how hard that would have been for them. Students were still pressuring for hitchhiking reform in light of the missing girls, and the Morgantown Police Department harbored a crucial secret. On March 25th of 1970, it would come out that Marid Malarik's purse had been found by a child collecting bottles around 10 miles outside of Morgantown. Along U.S. Highway 119, he discovered the fully intact purse and turned it in to the police, which is where it sat, allegedly on top of a file cabinet for more than a month. its presence did not spur the police into investigating the case more seriously, which is so baffling to me and such a mistake on their part, in my opinion. So when it became public knowledge that the police department still thought that the girls had run away, despite the fact that Marit's purse had been found abandoned off the highway, the community began to openly attack the police department's competency, and rightfully so, if you ask me. Just a few weeks after this, Karen's faded and scratched driver's license would be recovered by another child just south of Morgantown. On April 9th, a letter postmarked from Cumberland, Maryland arrived at the police station, and it read, quote, "Gentlemen, I have information on the whereabouts of the bodies of 2 missing West Virginia co-eds, Marit Malarick and Karen Farrell." It then continued on to provide mysterious instructions as to where the girls could be found. Quote, 25 miles directly south from the southern line of Morgantown. Enter into the forest exactly 1 mile. 25 plus 1 equals 26 total miles. End quote. A symbol of a triangle was signed in lieu of a name at the end of the letter, the author promising to reveal himself once the bodies were found. So this will be very mysterious letter number 1. Slowly, more and more of the girls' belongings would begin to show up as the state police stepped in to investigate. Most of their belongings were located in remote areas, found in the woods. Some of the items that they found that belonged to Marit and Karen included a prescription bottle with Karen's name on it, a compact, a tube of lipstick, a pocketbook, Marit's glasses, Karen's purse, a lighter, pens, an eyeshadow pencil, mascara, a green headscarf, and other miscellaneous items from the girls' purses were collected. The most optimistic friends and family members just desperately hoped that the girls were leaving a trail of their items behind so that they could be found. And imagining maybe that they were kidnapped and they were tossing items out of the car that they were being driven in by their kidnapper. But so many of the items were found too far from the roadside for that to have been a plausible theory. And so that hope didn't really last long. And on April 14th, after a tragic discovery, all hope would be lost. A second letter would arrive on April 10th, which would include a detailed description of where their bodies could be found. It said, quote, "specific direct south from the city," meaning the southern limit of Morgantown, West Virginia. "Look carefully. The animals are now on the move." End quote. And again, this second mysterious letter was signed only with a triangle and postmarked Cumberland, Maryland. Police efforts to find the girls' bodies some 26 miles south of Morgantown proved to be fruitless. On April 14th, only 10 miles from the city on the archaic Weirton Mine Road, the bodies of Marit and Karen were discovered. One member of the search party could not believe his eyes when he saw what he thought was a foot sticking out from a pile of brush. The woodland debris in this area was actually a rough tomb created from large, heavy slabs that appeared to have been carried from a nearby creek bank. Under the slabs and brush, the bodies were stacked one on top of the other, chest to chest. Unfortunately, these bodies did not have the heads attached anymore. Decomposition and animal predation had occurred over the course of the 2.5 months since they had last been seen alive. Both of the girls were fully clothed in the same items from that fateful night after leaving the theater, except Marit was missing her fur boots and Karen was without her fur coat. There were no signs of any kind of assault, and the crime scene was curiously devoid of blood. Coroners believed that the weapon that would have been used to separate the heads from the body would have been an axe or a machete. Now, less than a week later, after finding their bodies, a third letter would arrive at the police station, and it would detail how police could locate the missing heads. However, due to its cryptic ramblings and the previous letter's grievous error in the location of the bodies, the police did not want to give it much credence. A fourth and final letter was received at Marit Malarik's parents' home back in New Jersey. The author would blame a satanic cult for the killings and alleged that their heads were needed for a black magic ritual. I cannot even fathom what her parents must have felt in that moment, like throughout the entire investigation process up to the point of finding the bodies, to know that the heads were missing, and then they receive a personalized letter at their house when the other 3 letters had gone directly to the police. Like, that is just too close for comfort. And I don't know, there's something about the fact that the letters switched from going to the police station to Marit's parents' house that just, gives me the freaking heebie-jeebies. Unfortunately, and I think it's unfortunate, I don't know, I guess, but I'm gonna say unfortunately, the heads were never found, and to this day, nobody knows where they were. Initial suspects included a member of a local band that Karen and Marit had gone to see just before their disappearance. Another West Virginia University student had a previous run-in with the law when he had picked up 2 girls hitchhiking and refused to let them out of his car. And the Psychic Science Church of New Jersey, who it was discovered had crafted the letters after channeling psychic spirits who gave them insight into the case. Which is bizarre to me. So these were some of the suspects that they were looking at as to who was involved in these murders. And although there were numerous suspects, that abounded after the discovery. One by one, they would be eliminated. In January of 1976, a man named Eugene Paul Clausen would claim that he killed the girls. The 36-year-old New Jersey resident was serving time for assaulting an underage girl and boy at gunpoint. He would tell a tale about how he had been working in Morgantown at the time and had his friend punch his time card while he prowled the streets looking for prey. He would claim that borrowing a machete from his brother, that he was armed and ready when he offered Marid and Karen a ride. He would then say that he headed toward the old Weirton mine before pulling over, forcing the girls to perform, quote, unnatural acts on one another, and then would state that he assaulted them. He would also say that he tied them together, trudged them out into the forest, shot them each, and then decapitated them, taking their heads with him before later throwing them into a rocky crevice 2.5 hours away in Marion, Pennsylvania. All in all, Eugene would produce a 35-page confession describing the horrors that he had inflicted on the two young women. Now, while this story held some kind of promise for investigators, it was later discovered that Eugene created the elaborate description, hoping that it would excuse him from his charges in New Jersey and have him extradited to West Virginia. And he would recant what he had shared to the police in front of a judge. Curiously, though, he told police details about Marid and Karen's killing that were never made public, making his claim of innocence seem more outlandish than his tale of murder. Okay, so let's take a second and do our hidden gem. Our hidden gem is that there were 4 mysterious letters sent throughout the police investigation, giving clues about the whereabouts to where the bodies were found, and the information surrounding investigation. So, hidden gem is that there were 4 mysterious letters. Okay, let's continue. So it would later be discovered that any inconsistencies in Eugene's story mirrored those of a novice magazine called Detective Cases. Everything that Eugene confessed did not quite match up with evidence appeared. And what he shared did match exactly the same in the magazine article. The most invalid part of evidence that he claimed was that he had assaulted both women numerous times. But if you remember that I had said, upon finding the bodies and doing an examination of their bodies, they didn't think that Marid and Karen had actually been assaulted, so those two things do not match up. Furthermore, Eugene had been diagnosed with Klinefelter syndrome, which left him with severe erectile dysfunction and unable to have intercourse. Nevertheless, though, in the summer of 1976, Eugene would be tried for the kidnap, assault, and first-degree murders in the deaths of Karen and Marid. A close investigation of the rocky crevice where he stated he tossed the heads He would ultimately, though, be sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now, in 1981, there would be a retrial, and it would just produce the same results. Eugene Clausen became the co-ed killer, though he firmly stated his innocence until his death in 2009. And what's more is that there are many who believed, had the police only acted quickly due to mounting pressure to spin a suspect, and in doing so, that perhaps they had ignored other possible suspects. Suspects such as William Bernard Haggart Sr., who was arrested in 1971 for decapitating a man and stashing his remains in the woods, or John Brennan Crutchley, who had been known to assault women in the area and was from West Virginia, but during the time of their murders, he was attending college in Washington, D.C. Not to say that he couldn't have done it, but he was somebody that could have been a suspect. Another suspect was Eddie Slaughter, and he was a janitor at Marit and Karen's dorm during the time of their murder. Not long before the girls had gone missing, Eddie allegedly had offered another woman a ride, and then became increasingly odd as the trip progressed, making eerie comments about the girl's fur coat, stating that he loved to rub furry things. Police briefly investigated Eddie during the first few weeks of the case, discovering that he called in sick to work the day of and after the girl's disappearance. However, the fact that his handwriting did not match that found in the Triangle Letters, whose author was unknown at the time, eliminated him from their list. Now, let me just say for a second, I think that is such BS. Like, there's something about Eddie Slaughter that really stands out to me. It's the fact that, one, he gives a girl a ride and his comments freak her out, and he is clearly an odd duck, okay? He makes a comment about her fur coats and says that he loves to rub furry things. Now let's remember that Karen and Marit were found fully clothed, and the only two items or articles of clothing that were missing were the fur boots and the fur coat. Okay, so like those two things connect for me. And the fact that you're gonna eliminate this man as a suspect because his handwriting didn't match the letters. Like, are we amateurs? Is this amateur hour? My guy, like, you can literally have somebody else write this for you. Like, are you joking? Like, when I read that for the first time, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And we know that Eugene gets sentenced to prison and is considered the co-ed killer, but I personally am not convinced that he did it because he didn't have all the right evidence. Okay, so I think they put the wrong man in prison, but okay, that's just me. So, in 2006, decades after these murders happened, investigators would reopen this case and discovered that a Morgantown resident with a with a obsession for torturing animals may have information on the case. They would try to interview this man by the name of Ronnie Bird, but he would refuse to speak to them and became belligerent when they pressed to know the make and model of the car he drove at the time time of Karen and Marit's murder, before police were asked to leave, they saw a picture on Ronnie's wall. Y'all guess who was on the wall? My favorite suspect of the hour, Eddie Slaughter. Eddie Slaughter was Ronnie's nephew. Like, again, amateur hour. My money is 1,000,000% on Eddie. But all in all, the police had around 30 viable suspects, but no direct link was ever made to any of them. At the time, West Virginia, like many other states, did not enforce bans on hitchhiking, and really bad tragic incidents occurred as a result. Furthermore, there were more than a handful of decapitations and dismemberments in and around Morgantown at the time of the girls' killings, whether they be known serial killers working the area or random murders. That part is unknown. Again, to this day, the heads of Karen Farrell and Marit Malarick had never been found, nor has who is responsible for this vile crime. A man was sentenced to life in prison, and if I had to put money on it, I really don't think that he was guilty. I mean, he made up this story, I get that, and the fact that he did it for the sake of being extradited to West Virginia instead of having to be in New Jersey, that's bizarre to me, because the charges he was facing in New Jersey, although they were really bad, they're the punishment is not as severe as it is for murder and dismembering bodies. So, what a dumb thing to do, honestly, in my opinion, because then he ends up wanting to take it back, what he said, and plead his innocence, when I really do think he was innocent of that crime all along. I fully believe that he assaulted those kids in New Jersey, and he should have paid, the time for those, and, done the time, been guilty of that. But, I feel like the police went with that story and let him go to prison for the murders, and, completely gave up and did not look close enough at Eddie Slaughter. And then Ronnie Bird is his uncle. Can you guys tell how peeved I am by this one? I don't get it. Oh my god. Okay, well. And it's also, I just want to say that Karen, being the paranoid 19-year-old girl that she was, having this weird sense of impending doom and this, superstitious belief that something bad was coming for her, it makes me so sad that is what actually happens and becomes true for her life. And Marit's, of course, too. But, the whole thing just makes me so sad. So, anyways, that is the case of the West Virginia University co-ed murders. This was a new case to me. I hadn't heard of this one as of recently, and I was just so, bothered by the suspect situation that I wanted to film this one and get it out, because I want to desperately know what everyone's opinion on this one is. So please let me know your thoughts. Thank you, and until next time.